Yep, and we move them all?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, delegations to the Chief Executive.
Do you want to do much?
No, we'll keep going.
He's just changing the amount.
Yeah, I see that. Councillor Cam has a proposed amendment. Councillor Cam. Can we just type that out, please? Do you have a seconder?
Well, not at this stage, but I'm happy to talk to it, and I'm sure
No,
they'll be
you
flooding.
won't talk to it until you get a seconder. Councillors, I have a proposed seconder. Good on you, Councillor Quacks. Okay, look, councillors, we have had some discussions with regard to the proposed recommendations that you have in front of you, and I would like to ask the Chief Executive Officer, I am supportive of this recommendation as it stands. We have had a reasonable discussion about this in terms of the delegations to the Chief Executive Officer, and the original delegations were proposed against the backdrop of the city uniting. And in uniting the city, I think in the first term in particular and the beginning of the second term, have been mindful of wanting to keep quite close eye on everything to do with the executive and ensuring that we manage the role of the executive as best we can within reasonable delegations, and also follow that through our committee structure. I think that having now seen the transition CEO, Doug Mackay, conclude his time, and having appointed Stephen as a new Chief Executive Officer, understanding better our balance sheet, and certainly understanding better how we're working together as an organisation, both in terms of our governance role and in terms of the role of the Chief Executive Officer and the organisation, it is probably timely for us to reflect on the fact that we manage and govern a $5 billion per annum budget, that much of what we do depends on the good, competent and timely management of that budget by our Chief Executive Officer, and that having appropriate delegations for the Chief Executive Officer to operate under, given the fact that we set the governance direction and the budgetary direction, and then ask the Chief Executive Officer and the organisation to deliver that reasonable delegations to enable the Chief Executive Officer to act on our political direction is not unreasonable, given the fact that we are governing a $5 billion budget. So with those thoughts, I would like to ask Stephen to reflect a little bit on his experience from the viewpoint of managing within the present criteria and what is being proposed. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. So we have had the substance of the discussion about the proposal to move the delegations into this space with the Chief Executive Officer's Review Committee chaired by Councillor Fletcher, and there was a resolution, I think was unanimously passed at our last meeting, to support the recommendation that you've got today. This, from our point of view, is part, as Councillor Darby mentioned, there is a package of governance and management clarity occurring here. So we have the CCO review in play, we have the standing orders, we have the committee structure item and the delegations to the Chief Executive. So I would view those as a package, and it's still a work in progress. And I think the other point to note, now that you can see the executive leadership team refresh in place, that in Dean Kimpton and Sue Tyndall and Jim Quinn, we actually have people who have worked at a chief executive level. So we have a different sort of bench strength across those disciplines, and this is part of strengthening our management effectiveness and efficiency, and creating a bit more clarity for where does governance need to play a role. I think also to keep in mind with the delegations that everything happens here within an approved set of budget parameters, so we don't spend money on things that aren't in our long-term plan and our annual plan. And as we discussed during the LTP process, the budgets are effectively all capped. So this is not stepping into a different world. It's simply giving a more efficient delivery structure, and one that we can sensibly sub-delegate to our chiefs to work on together. So look, we hope you're feeling comfortable that you can support these changes, and we will implement them on the 1st of July if you're happy to support it.
Okay, very good. I have got Councillor Callum.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I'm sure that I was actually going to move it, but I'm sure Councillor Fletcher is happy to move it, and I'm happy to second it.
Yes, certainly. Yep.
And being that I'm not on this, I'm not on the CEO review committee, but I do attend all of them, and I was part of that last discussion that we've had on this particular item, and it's self-explanatory in the agenda item here. It's pretty clear. And very impressed with Stephen's stewardship on this council. So on that note, I'm happy to second this.
Okay, Councillor John.
Just a question. The delegations include financial transactions, including real estate and disposal of assets. There's $650 million worth of assets in the long-term plan to be sold off, plus an undisclosed amount of service property. My question is, under this delegation, then what onus is on the Chief Executive or anyone else to come before Council when any one of these assets are getting sold off? I'm assuming they don't all come through ACPL, given that we have a reference to real estate and disposal of other assets here. So I'm really seeking clarification on what assets or real estate wouldn't come to us through the normal course of events.
Steve?
So through you, Chair, there's no proposal to change the disposal decision-making processes that you already go through with ACPL, bringing you those recommendations after they've gone through that very thorough consultation and engagement process with relevant iwi, with the local board, and those all come through to you. So there's no change to any of those processes.
So no assets or no real estate disposed of through that delegation?
Well, yes, eventually, but not before it's gone through your current disposal interrogation that you generally drill down into pretty deeply through the Finance and Performance Committee.
Okay, good. Councillor John. Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the beginning of this term, the CEO Review Committee has met on a regular basis, and we have fully explored this issue. There has been a desire, and following on from the comments made by Councillor Darby, to really improve the governance and make that distinction between where we are making strategic decisions and where we are wanting management to deliver on those strategic actions. So as we have progressed this paper, and I do want to acknowledge Michael Quinn and Alan Brookbanks for the support as we've tried to progress this particular piece of work. It did enjoy unanimous support at the last meeting. I think that there are check and balances, but the reality is we do need to take some change. We do want to see, and as I referred to in the previous item, we want to see those operational efficiencies coming through. So I think this is a request that has come to us from our CEO that we all unanimously supported. This has been considered in a very thoughtful, careful way. He has already put in place new checks and balances. I mean, by virtue of the fact that we're seeing a lot more information having daylight for the public, where there's public interest in contracts and so on. And this can always be changed if we find that it isn't working to the way that councillors have in terms of expectation. But I think it's time to seek change, to see how this will work. I do want, however, for the CEO to reflect on how those issues that are referred to in the report, where you have a controversial matter, how that judgment call will be made in terms of what is appropriate to bring back to council for guidance and consideration. But I would really implore members of this governing body to support this measure. I think it will give us the opportunity to really start to bring a strategic focus to those big policy issues that we need, and it's a good form of partnership with the ELT team that we now have as we can try and progress things. So I would encourage you to support it. But Stephen, if you could just speak very briefly to the judgment that you will exercise in terms of making sure that councillors have a say on matters that will become controversial.
Through you, Chair, thank you. I think two real examples that I can give you, which are both, are topical and current. One is the proposal to establish a purpose-built committee room in the tower. That is something that I could proceed under the delegations, and I said I would not do that unless we had elected member support. So that's a demonstration of me, I think, using the appropriate judgment to engage with you on something that I could have proceeded with but would have been foolhardy to do so without your majority support. And the second example I'd give is the extraordinary item that you're considering today. Given the scale of that, let's say that had been 19 million, that settlement, I would have engaged with the governing body before making a payment of that nature, because again, it's got issues around it that you as governors would want to be appraised of, rather than me just making that payment. So that's another good example of, even with a $25 million delegation, I would have brought that through to GB for support.
So it's moved and seconded.
That's good. Right, now we have a proposed amendment. Councillor Cam, would you like to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my proposed amendment puts that we increase, we double the delegated amount to 15 million. And I suppose what I'm trying to put here is trying to balance some balance between giving the Chief Executive greater authority over getting the job done, as well as ensuring that we have financial oversight, greater financial oversight, as is the public has been calling for. And so it is a double of amount of the current delegation, but it's not quite the 166% increase that is being proposed today. And you've said, Mr. Mayor, that this is well timed. Well, I just want to put the argument out that I don't think that this is well timed. The public are clearly telling us, and they've been telling us through the Ports of Auckland issue as well, that they don't want us to relinquish our governance oversight, particularly on financial matters. And I personally believe that this should be a decision for the next council and the next administration to decide when they come in with a lot of political capital and a strong political mandate. And so I just don't believe that this is that by increasing the delegation, and I accept the chief executives, the commercial acumen that we have on the ELT now, the chief executive experience, and I accept that this is part of a package of operational efficiencies and better governance, if you like. But what I don't accept is that the timing of it, I believe, for such a huge quantum in delegation is not right and should be for the next administration. So putting that aside, I didn't want to vote against this, but what I wanted to do is kind of put up a third way, which could see the delegated amount doubled, but not to the proposed extent. And so I think also with these other efficiencies that we've talked about today with committee meetings, times and that, I think they also need to be realised, and I just can't see the need as to why we would lift this delegation at this time, and I don't believe that we are sitting around because of the delegated amount being low.